Well, I'm really excited to be here, number one, but I'm really excited that we're starting with this paper because this publication kind of was, we were at the forefront of this years ago
Yeah.
when we thought about what's going on with mom, what are the physiological changes, and what does nutrition look like during that first 1,000 days. We want to make sure that those who are thinking about pregnant have optimal nutrition and that they are nourished through pregnancy and then through second birthday. So when baby is born, that they have the proper nutrients they need to thrive. So we put this paper together really, it wasn't a clinical trial. It was really a narrative review to look at dietary intake patterns, to see what are those who are thinking about pregnant eating, what are we currently eating. We looked at big cross-sectional data sets like NHANES, National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. Yep. And of course, it just gives you a snapshot. But from all this, we collectively identify that, there are kind of like 8 key nutrients that we really need to focus on during these 1,000 days of life. And that comes down to the carotenoids, both lutein and zeaxanthine, choline, folate, iron, of course, vitamin D, iodine, and those omega-3 fatty acids. So those really popped out. It's not that the other nutrients are less important.
Right.
These are the ones that are just ultimately important.
Well, and you mentioned a few there, of course, that we become so familiarized, even in pop culture and a lot of this dissemination through mainstream media, the omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin D. But a few I heard you say there, people have to know more about choline, but iodine and the carotenoids.
Yeah.
How come we don't hear much about those guys in mainstream?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's kind of like not all nutrients are the superstar, right? So not that these have fallen through the cracks, but you think about the carotenoids, lutein and zeaxanthine, and the role that they really play in visual acuity and eye health, right? And oftentimes, when you look at big cross-sectional data sets, we know that sometimes these are also underconsumed in the diet. And similar with iodine. Iodine is kind of like one of those that's really difficult to get sometimes if you're not eating seaweed or having iodized salt in your diet. It's one of those that kind of like falls by the wayside, right? So it's important that we tease this one out, and iodine has roles in T3, T4 production, plays a huge role in growth and development and metabolism. So we really wanted to kind of put a call to action for nutrients that sometimes are forgotten about, and those two kind of rise to the top too.
So T3, T4, you're referring to the thyroid and its role in growth and development.
Absolutely, yeah.
So the upcoming, 2020, 2025 dietary guidelines for Americans will focus on recommendations for children, making this review particularly timely for supporting evidence-based nutrition. Practices for mothers and families to know. But what changes, updates do you hope to see in this new guideline?
Dietary guidelines are, first of all, hands off to the committee for doing this, because this is just like a huge public policy document that requires so many experts put their heads together and review mountains of evidence, right? So I, personally as a dietitian, as advanced practice dietitian who's working really actively in this gut health, kind of digestive health space and family nutrition, I want to see more kind of like practical information for healthcare practitioners and families, because I get questions all of the time about, I'm so confused about reading food and nutrition labels. I'm so confused about dietary supplements. I'm so confused about what sources of food count for these nutrients and how I get them in their diet. And for those consumers who are also a bit underserved or have limited financial means, how they're able to get these nutrients from the food that they do have access to. So I think just, practicality of like, how do we communicate nutrition science, take it kind of top down, right? From evidence to the day-to-day practical implications. It's not an easy job. And I think, they've done a fantastic job. And I'm just really happy to see that these recommendations are coming through in the next step.
Is this digestible, excuse the pun, to the average consumer? Can they look at this guideline and make sense of it, or do they need an RD or a nutritionist to help them out? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Then I think about images like My Plate, right?
Yeah.
So My Plate really came out of the dietary guidelines for Americans. It's a way to be able to kind of picture, in a nutshell, what are the guidelines talking about in terms of how we're supposed to be eating on a day-to-day basis. So that's one thing. Do they need an RD? I think people need RDs every day, right? I mean, nutrition is a lovely field to be in, but I think for day-to-day consumers, it's very confusing. So to be able to have someone that can guide them is amazing. And that could be done in different ways. It doesn't have to be done one-to-one. It can be done at the public health education level. It could be done through webinars. It can be done through informational handouts. It could be done through podcasts and media, right? But I think our job as practitioners who are qualified is to be able to translate this stuff into a way that is meaningful, that someone is able to take away those digestible tidbits and not be confused.
Sure.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So when we look at the diversity of foods and foods that are so important, for mother and baby and child and infant developing.
Yeah.
Really where all that food ends up is in the small intestine and into the microbiome.
Absolutely.
So would you like to talk about the connection about foods we eat, the diversity of the microbiome, the huge role it plays in childhood health, and just how diet and the other factors influence and create that microbiome? Because that's really where it comes from what we eat.
Absolutely. Yeah. So diet, we know by now, plays a huge role in the microbiome and how it affects the composition of the microbiome. So if a mom is thinking about getting pregnant, what she eats definitely is going to influence her growing baby, right? But in the dietary guidelines for Americans, they call out fiber, right? So fiber, time and time again, has always been identified as one of those nutrients of public health concern because we just don't get enough. It's very hard. And I don't want to say fiber is like a magic nutrient, but in terms of how it affects the microbiome, it is so important because the bacteria in your gut, they naturally reside there. When fiber is introduced into the diet and consumed, it serves as a substrate for, those bacteria that are in the large intestine. They use that as food, especially if the fiber is prebiotic and soluble. It can use that as fuel, ferments it, and it produces these other beneficial bacteria in the gut, which is great because that's strengthening the gut, right? And then we have these short-chain fatty acids, these beneficial metabolites that are produced as a result of fiber fermentation. And that we now know can contribute to whole body health. So when you think about obesity, metabolic syndrome, all of these diseases, that exist in society, I'm not saying they can be cured by fiber, but we can certainly reduce our risk if we were getting more of these, essential nutrients.
It's a significant stopgap. I mean, fiber really, in my opinion, it's my humble opinion, is not a true supplement in the order of micronutrient deficiency, let's call it.
Yeah.
But to your point, butyrate, acetate, these postbiotics, they're the basically, let's call it probiotic. Let's call it what it is, probiotic poop. It's what they excrete that we need that you can't really get from many other places. So, and it's a fancy new buzz term of the day, postbiotics. But there's the that's what you're talking about, the food that feeds the good bacteria that we're starting to learn is related to everything, our immune system, brain-gut connection, all these different things.
Yeah.
But then these postbiotics, I mean, let's unpack that a little bit more. What are they doing for us?
Yeah, well, I think this is kind of like this whole area of biotics, right? It's like a newer emerging field. And traditionally, we always talk about pre and pro because, let's face it, like probiotics sometimes don't thrive well without the pre. Right. And then we have post. So these are, like, in my mind, like the new kids on the block.
Right.
So I think collectively we still have a lot to learn about postbiotics. We know that they can be beneficial for gut health. We know that they can be beneficial potentially for whole body health as well. And we also know that, food manufacturers, supplement manufacturers are interested in these ingredients for the potential health benefit areas they offer to consumers. So I think more to learn from postbiotics for sure, but I think it's exciting to see that we're identifying kind of these novel iotics, right?
For sure.
That can help health.
In your clinical practice, Dr. Murray, what are you seeing in terms of the deficiency levels of fiber in children? I mean, constipation comes to mind, but it's so far beyond the conversation of constipation.
No, really, this is where we have to really put things together. So looking at the digestive tract, we can see obvious symptoms like colic, constipation, things like this, which many, many times are a request for more probiotics, prebiotics. That's the corrective measure. But at the same time, when that's happening in the gut, then we also see immune problems in children. We see behavioral disorders in children because the seat of the immune system is also wrapped around the small intestine, all the lymph nodes, the lymph sort of central stations there. So that's when Hippocrates said, all diseases begin in the gut. It's like this is where it starts. And if we don't correct this correctly, then nothing else gets corrected correctly either.